You ever notice how the loudest men in America are usually the ones who've never heard gunfire? The voice came from somewhere near the diesel pumps, low and rough like gravel under old tires. The laughter that followed was sharp, mean, and carried easily across the lonely Arizona gas station. Heat shimmered above the blacktop in wavering lines. The afternoon sun hung over the desert like molten brass, baking the faded fuel signs and rusted ice freezer outside the mini-mart. A line of motorcycles sat crooked near the entrance, chrome glinting hard enough to hurt the eyes. Leather vests, heavy boots, engines ticking softly as they cooled in the heat. The men around them looked like they owned the road, and everyone forced to stop on it. Arthur Mercer stepped out of an old, faded Ford pickup with the slow, careful movements of a man who understood pain better than most people understood weather. The truck door creaked behind him. One hand rested on a black cane worn smooth from years of use. His right leg ended below the knee in a titanium prosthetic hidden beneath worn denim jeans. He moved steadily anyway. No complaint. No hesitation. Just the quiet rhythm of someone long accustomed to carrying old damage without asking for sympathy. His denim jacket looked older than some of the motorcycles parked nearby. Dust clung to the shoulders. A sun-faded patch rested near the sleeve seam. Nearly impossible to make out unless someone looked closely. Nobody there did. Not at first. Logan Pike noticed him immediately. Logan sat tilted back in a plastic chair near the entrance, heavy arms crossed over his stained black shirt, silver rings flashing beneath tattooed knuckles. Mid-40s. Thick beard. Loud confidence. The kind of man who mistook intimidation for strength. He watched Arthur limp toward the door and smirked at the men beside him. "Well, damn," Logan said loudly. "Looks like the War Museum finally started doing field trips." The bikers laughed. One slapped the gas pump beside him. Another shook his head and grinned toward Arthur's prosthetic leg. "Careful, old-timer," somebody called out. "Don't lose another part in the parking lot." Arthur kept walking. The cane tapped softly against concrete. Tap, step, tap, step. No reaction crossed his weathered face. The old man's pale blue eyes stayed fixed ahead on the mini-mart entrance, as if the voices behind him belonged to another world entirely. That bothered Logan more than anger would have. Inside the station, 24-year-old Mia Brooks stood behind the register restocking cigarette cartons with nervous hands. She had seen the bikers arrive 40 minutes earlier and felt the mood change instantly. Loud men always change the air in places like this. But when she saw the old veteran walking toward the door alone, something tightened in her chest. Maybe it was the cane. Maybe it was the calm in his eyes. Or maybe it was because her older brother had carried that same distant look ever since coming home from the Marines. Arthur reached the entrance just as Logan stood up from his chair. Boots scraped against concrete. The biker blocked the doorway with a grin stretched wide beneath his beard. "Hold up there, Grandpa," Logan said. "You got enough gas money left after paying for all that government hardware." Another burst of laughter rolled through the group. Arthur slowly lifted his gaze toward him. There was no fear in his eyes. No challenge either. Just exhaustion. The kind that settled deep into a man after surviving too many years other people never saw. A dry desert wind pushed dust across the parking lot. Somewhere out on the highway, a semi-truck groaned past beneath the blazing Arizona sun. Arthur adjusted his grip on the cane and spoke quietly. "Just trying to buy a cup of coffee." Logan smirked wider. "That's so." His eyes drifted down toward the prosthetic leg again. Hell of a price for coffee these days. The bikers laughed harder this time. But Arthur Mercer did not flinch. Because long before the desert heat, long before roadside gas stations and loud men in leather vests, he had heard rotor blades over burning sand. And compared to that, mockery was just noise. The mini-mart door creaked shut behind Arthur Mercer, muting the laughter outside into a dull, restless rumble beneath the hum of fluorescent lights. Cool air rolled across his weathered face, carrying the smell of burnt coffee, motor oil, and old hot dogs turning slowly beneath heat lamps that had probably not been cleaned in years. Arthur moved toward the coffee station with the same measured pace he had carried through the parking lot. Tap, step, tap, step. The black cane touched the tile floor softly. His reflection drifted across the refrigerator glass beside him for half a second. Gray hair, deep lines carved by sun and time. Eyes that looked older than 81 years. eyes that still scanned exits automatically without him ever realizing it. Mia watched him quietly from behind the register. Up close, the old man looked even more unusual. Not dangerous, not intimidating, just composed, like somebody who carried silence differently than everyone else. Most older men who stopped through the station either talked too much or complained about something. Arthur Mercer did neither. He simply stood there pouring black coffee into a paper cup with steady hands that barely trembled despite the cane and prosthetic leg. Outside, motorcycle engines coughed to life for a moment before dying again. Logan and his crew had not left. They were waiting. Arthur already knew that. He reached into the inside pocket of his faded denim jacket and placed 3 crumpled dollar bills on the counter. Mia glanced down at his hand and noticed the scars first. Thin pale lines crossing the knuckles. Burn marks near the wrist. Old injuries long healed, but never truly gone. Then she noticed something else. Near the cuff of his sleeve, partly hidden beneath worn fabric, sat a faded patch stitched carefully onto the jacket. Dark thread, almost impossible to make out under the station lights. But she recognized enough of the shape to feel a chill crawl up her spine. Her brother had once shown her something similar in an old military book after returning home from deployment. Not an official insignia. Something older, quieter, the kind of thing people did not talk about openly. Arthur noticed her staring and slowly pulled the sleeve down over it without a word. "Coffee is on the house," Mia said softly. Arthur looked up. "No," he replied gently. "You keep the lights on. I pay my way." His voice was calm, but carried a weight that made the words land heavier than they should have. Mia nodded awkwardly and handed him the change anyway. Outside, Logan suddenly pounded once against the glass window with the side of his fist, grinning wide when Mia flinched. "You hiding in there, Grandpa?" he shouted through the glass. Thought soldiers were supposed to be brave. More laughter exploded behind him. One biker lifted a phone, already recording. Arthur did not even turn his head toward the noise. He picked up the coffee slowly and tested the lid with his thumb like it was the only thing in the world deserving his attention. That calmness started bothering Logan now in ways he could not explain. Most men reacted eventually. Anger, fear, embarrassment, something. But the old veteran gave them nothing. No raised voice. No threats. Just silence. And silence had a strange way of making loud men uncomfortable. The desert wind outside grew stronger, rattling the loose metal sign near the diesel pumps. Sand whispered across the parking lot in dry, uneven streaks. Arthur finally turned toward the exit again. Tap, step, tap, step. Mia swallowed hard as he approached the door. "Sir," she said quietly. Arthur paused. "You should probably wait a little before going back outside." For the first time, a faint expression touched his face. Not amusement exactly. Something sadder than that. "Miss," he said softly, "if a man spends his whole life waiting for bad people to leave, he never gets anywhere worth going." Then he opened the door and stepped back into the Arizona heat, while the bikers outside slowly rose from their chairs one by one. The heat hit Arthur Mercer the second he stepped back outside, thick and dry like air rolling out of an open furnace. The late afternoon sun hung lower now, casting long shadows across the gas station lot. Motorcycle chrome flashed in the orange light. Engines ticked softly. Somewhere beyond the highway, thunder muttered over distant desert mountains even though the sky above the station remained cloudless and cruelly bright. Logan Pike pushed himself away from the doorway with a grin spreading beneath his beard. The biker gang slowly formed a loose wall between Arthur and his old Ford pickup. Boots scraped across concrete. Leather creaked. One of the younger bikers kept recording everything on his phone, laughing under his breath every few seconds like a teenager desperate for attention. Arthur stopped beside the fuel pumps. His coffee cup steamed faintly in one hand, while the black cane rested against the pavement beside his prosthetic leg. Calm. Completely calm. That unsettled them more than fear ever could. Logan tilted his head. "You know what your problem is, old man?" Arthur looked at him quietly. Logan spread his arms wide toward the others. "Guys like you still think anybody cares about medals and war stories." A few of the bikers nodded immediately. "World moved on," another one added. "Nobody owes you anything." Arthur's eyes drifted toward the empty desert highway beyond them. Endless black asphalt cutting through sand and heat haze. "You are right," he said softly. "Nobody owes anybody anything." The answer caught Logan slightly off guard. He had expected anger. Maybe pride. Something loud enough to entertain his crew. Instead, the old veteran sounded almost tired, like he had already learned every lesson the younger man still needed life to teach him. Logan smirked harder to cover the discomfort creeping into his chest. Then maybe you should stop walking around dressed like some forgotten hero. His eyes dropped toward Arthur's faded denim jacket. Before Mia could react from inside the store window, one of the bikers stepped closer and grabbed lightly at the shoulder seam of the old jacket. "Look at this thing," the biker laughed. "Probably older than my dad." The worn fabric shifted. Just enough. A small patch near Arthur's sleeve became fully visible beneath the fading sunlight. Dark stitching. Weathered thread. A strange symbol almost erased by time. Not military standard. Not something sold in stores. The biker squinted at it and burst out laughing. "What the hell even is that?" Logan leaned forward for a better look. "Looks fake to me." But inside the mini-mart, Mia Brooks froze. The patch hit her memory like cold water. She had seen it once before in an old framed photograph sitting in her brother's garage beside a folded Marine Corps flag. Her brother had pointed at it quietly one night after too many beers and said, "If you ever see that symbol for real, stay respectful." At the time she thought he was joking. Now her stomach tightened hard enough to hurt. Outside, the biker still held Arthur's sleeve between two fingers, grinning for the camera phone pointed at them. Arthur slowly lowered his gaze toward the hand touching the jacket. The desert wind shifted suddenly, carrying dust through the lot in thin, twisting ribbons. When Arthur finally spoke, his voice dropped lower than before. Not angry, not threatening, just heavy. "You should let go of that." Something about the words made the younger biker hesitate. For half a second, uncertainty crossed his face. But Logan immediately laughed again from behind him. "What happens if he does not?" Arthur looked at him quietly. His pale blue eyes reflected the dying Arizona sunlight like old cracked ice. "Nothing," he answered. "But there are some things men regret touching once they understand what they belong to." Silence settled over the gas station for one strange, suspended moment. Even the biker recording lowered his phone slightly. Then Logan barked out another laugh loud enough to shatter the tension. "Hear that, boys? Grandpa thinks he is dangerous." But Arthur Mercer was no longer looking at them. His eyes had drifted toward the reflection in the dark gas station window beside the pumps. And for the briefest moment, the old veteran did not see the Arizona desert staring back at him. He saw black water under moonlight, rotor blades cutting through rain, burning wreckage reflected across shattered waves, and a radio voice screaming one name through static and smoke. "Reaper 6, come in." The reflection in the gas station window trembled beneath the dying sunlight, and suddenly Arthur Mercer was no longer standing in the Arizona desert. The heat disappeared first, then the motorcycles, then the laughter. In their place came rain. Cold black rain hammering against dark ocean water beneath a moonless sky. Rotor blades thundered overhead with that deep, violent rhythm. Only military helicopters carried, the kind of sound that settled into a man's bones and never fully left. Arthur saw fire reflected across the waves. Twisted wreckage burned near jagged rocks less than 50 yards from shore. Smoke rolled sideways through the storm as radio chatter cracked through static. "Reaper 6, respond." "Reaper 6, do you copy?" The voices sounded younger than memory should have allowed. Arthur was younger too, stronger. Both legs still beneath him as freezing water crashed against black tactical gear soaked with seawater and fuel. He remembered the smell most clearly. Salt, smoke, hydraulic fluid, fear, not his own, theirs. A younger operator stumbled through the surf nearby, carrying another man over his shoulder. Barely more than a kid, 23 maybe, face streaked with rain and exhaustion. "Chief," the young operator shouted through the storm. "We are losing the bird." Arthur turned toward the wreckage half submerged against the rocks. The helicopter leaned sideways beneath crashing waves, rotor bent, engine compartment glowing orange through smoke. Somewhere inside, trapped men were still trying to get out. Arthur never hesitated. He never had. That was why they called him Reaper 6 long before the missions became classified and long before entire operations disappeared from official records. Some men froze under pressure. Arthur Mercer became calmer. He handed his rifle to the younger operator without a word and moved back toward the burning wreckage while rain hammered the ocean around him hard enough to sting. "Chief, wait," the younger man yelled. Arthur ignored him. Because somewhere beneath the screaming metal and grinding surf, somebody was still alive. The memory shifted violently. A burst of sparks. Twisted steel. A hand reaching through smoke. Arthur grabbing tactical straps and dragging another soaked operator free across slippery rock, while rotor blades shrieked overhead like dying animals. Then came the sound. A deep cracking roar that split the storm apart. The world tilted sideways. White light swallowed everything. Back in Arizona, Arthur blinked slowly as the reflection vanished from the glass. Heat rushed. Back into existence. The gas station. The bikers. The wind. For half a second his right hand tightened harder around the black cane before relaxing again. Nobody there understood what had just passed through his mind except perhaps Mia Brooks, watching nervously through the station window. She saw the change in his face. Not fear. Pain. Old pain. The kind buried deep enough that only memory could still reach it. Logan Pike stepped closer with a grin that had started looking thinner around the edges. "What happened, old man?" he asked mockingly. "You drift off on us?" Arthur looked at him quietly. "Just remembering the ocean." The bikers laughed again, but weaker this time. Uneasy. One of them finally let go of Arthur's jacket sleeve and stepped back without realizing he had done it. Logan noticed immediately and scowled. He hated weakness in front of his crew. "You know what I think?" Logan said louder now. "I think that patch is fake military garbage for old men who miss being important." Arthur studied him for a long moment beneath the fading desert sunlight. Then he nodded once. "That is probably easier for you to believe." The answer landed strangely hard. No anger. No defense. Just certainty. And certainty unsettled, insecure men faster than threats ever could. Inside the mini-mart, Mia finally grabbed her phone with trembling fingers. She zoomed carefully toward the patch on Arthur's sleeve through the dusty glass window and snapped a picture. Then she opened her contacts and selected her brother's name. Tyler Brooks, former Marine Recon. The message she typed was short. "Do you recognize this symbol?" The reply came less than 30 seconds later. 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared. Then came a single sentence that made the blood drain from her face. "Mia, where exactly are you right now?" Mia Brooks stared at the message on her phone while the desert wind rattled the station windows hard enough to make the hanging advertisements sway slightly overhead. Outside, the tension near the fuel pumps had changed shape. The bikers were still laughing, still circling Arthur Mercer with the lazy confidence of men convinced they controlled the situation, but something underneath the noise felt different now. Thinner. Unsteady. Mia looked back down at her phone and quickly typed a reply. "Dustway Gas and Market. Route 66 outside Flagstaff." The response from her brother came almost instantly this time. "Listen carefully. Is the old man still there?" Mia swallowed. "Yes." Several seconds passed. Then her phone rang. She answered immediately and lowered her voice. "Tyler." Her brother did not waste time with greetings. "Mia, you need to stay calm and tell me exactly what that patch looked like." She glanced toward Arthur through the window. The old veteran stood quietly beside Pump 4, coffee cup still in one hand, while Logan Pike paced slowly around him like a man trying too hard to impress an audience. "Dark stitching," Mia whispered. "Looks old. Circular shape maybe. There is something inside it. Hard to tell." Silence hit the line, so suddenly she thought the call dropped. Then Tyler spoke again, lower now. More serious than she had heard him since coming home from deployment 3 years earlier. "Mia, that is not something random." She leaned closer against the counter. "What is it?" Another pause. "I do not know officially," Tyler admitted. "But Marines hear stories. Everybody does. Old recon teams. Black operations. Men who disappeared from records after missions went bad." Mia looked back toward Arthur again. The old man had not moved. He stood completely still while Logan talked louder and louder in front of him. "That patch," Tyler continued carefully. "If it is the one I think it is, you need to be respectful. Tyler, they are messing with him." His breathing changed slightly on the other end. "Who is?" Mia glanced outside. "Bikers. Maybe 6 or 7 of them. And the old man? He is alone." Tyler cursed softly beneath his breath. Not angry. Nervous. That frightened Mia more than anything else. Her brother had once stayed calm through a highway pileup while pulling injured people from smoke and broken glass. She had never heard tension in his voice like this before. "Listen to me carefully," he said. "Do not escalate anything. Do not let those idiots push him around if you can help it. And Mia, he stopped briefly. Do not say the patch out loud around strangers. Why? She whispered. Because if that is really who I think it is, Tyler exhaled slowly. People are probably already looking for him. Outside, Logan suddenly slapped the hood of Arthur's old pickup hard enough to echo across the station lot. Come on, old man, he called loudly. At least tell us your fake soldier nickname. The younger bikers laughed again, while one kept recording with his phone raised high. Arthur finally lifted his eyes toward Logan. Calm, pale, impossible to read. I had one once, he answered quietly. Most men who used it are dead now. The laughter faded slightly after that. Not completely, but enough for the silence underneath to become noticeable. Mia's phone buzzed again before Tyler even hung up. Another incoming call. Unknown number. She frowned. Tyler, hold on. She switched over cautiously. Hello. A deep male voice answered immediately. Precise. Controlled. Military. This is Senior Chief Daniel Reeves. I was forwarded your message by Staff Sergeant Tyler Brooks. I need you to answer one question very carefully. Mia's throat tightened. Okay. The man paused for less than a second. Does the old veteran there walk with a black carbon cane? Mia looked through the window toward Arthur Mercer, standing alone beneath the burning Arizona sky. Yes, she whispered. Another silence followed. Heavy this time. The kind that carried weight. Then the senior chief spoke again, and suddenly every word sounded colder than the desert wind outside. Ma'am, whatever happens next, do not let that man leave alone. The desert sky had started turning copper along the horizon by the time Mia Brooks lowered the phone from her ear. The gas station lights flickered faintly overhead as evening crept slowly across the empty Arizona highway. Outside, the atmosphere around Arthur Mercer had changed again. The laughter from the bikers still came in bursts, but it no longer sounded natural. Too loud, too forced. Like men trying to convince themselves they still controlled something that was quietly slipping away from them. Logan Pike leaned against Pump Forwith, his arms crossed, smirking toward the old veteran while one of his crew circled slowly with a phone camera still recording. Come on, Grandpa, Logan called out. At least give us one good war story before bedtime. Arthur remained still beside the old Ford pickup. Wind pushed lightly against his faded denim jacket. The patch near his sleeve fluttered once before settling again. His coffee had gone cold several minutes earlier, but he still held the paper cup loosely in one weathered hand. Most stories worth hearing, Arthur said quietly, usually end with somebody wishing they listened sooner. Logan rolled his eyes dramatically for the benefit of his crew. There he goes again with the mysterious old man routine. A few bikers laughed, but not all of them this time. One younger rider near the motorcycles kept glancing nervously toward the dark highway stretching west beyond the station. The desert had grown strangely quiet. No passing traffic. No distant engines. Just dry wind hissing across asphalt and the low metallic creak of fuel pump signs shifting overhead. Inside the mini-mart, Mia's phone buzzed again. Another message from Senior Chief Reeves. How many bikers? She typed quickly. 7. The response came immediately. Any weapons visible? Mia looked carefully through the window. Leather vests. Chains hanging from belts. Heavy boots. But nothing openly displayed. No, she replied. Several seconds passed before another message appeared. Good. Stay inside. Her stomach tightened harder with every exchange. She stepped closer to the front glass and looked out toward Arthur. He still showed no sign of fear. No impatience. If anything, he seemed calmer than before. That calmness had started infecting the parking lot itself somehow, like pressure building silently before a storm. Then came the sound. Faint at first. Tires against highway pavement somewhere far beyond the station. Logan noticed it too and glanced toward the road. Headlights appeared in the distance. Then another set behind them. Then another. 3 black SUVs emerged slowly through the desert dusk without sirens or flashing lights. Just dark vehicles moving steadily across the empty highway toward the station. The bikers exchanged uncertain looks immediately. Probably cops, one muttered. Logan straightened slightly, but kept his grin in place. Relax. The SUVs turned into the station entrance together with smooth, deliberate precision. Gravel crunched beneath heavy tires. Nobody inside the vehicles rushed. Nobody used horns. The engines simply idled low and steady as the black convoy stopped near the edge of the lot. Tinted windows reflected the burning orange sunset. Silence spread instantly across the gas station. Even the biker holding the phone lowered it without realizing he had done so. Logan frowned now. What the hell is this? Arthur Mercer finally lifted his eyes toward the convoy. No surprise crossed his weathered face. If anything, he looked disappointed, like a man who had hoped the past might leave him alone for one more day. One SUV door opened slowly. Then another. Men stepped out wearing plain dark clothing. No visible insignia. No dramatic movements. But the way they carried themselves changed the entire atmosphere in seconds. Controlled. Alert. Quiet. The kind of men who did not need to prove anything to anyone. One biker took an unconscious step backward near the motorcycles. Another stopped, smiling entirely. Logan noticed and snapped irritably. Stand still. But his own confidence had begun cracking around the edges now too. The first man from the convoy scanned the parking lot once before his eyes settled directly on Arthur Mercer. He froze. Completely froze. The desert wind moved softly through the station as every sound seemed to disappear at once. Then the man removed his sunglasses slowly and whispered words that only Mia, standing closest to the glass, managed to hear. "Dear God," he said quietly. "Reaper 6 is alive." The desert seemed to stop breathing after the words left the man's mouth. Reaper 6 is alive. Nobody in the biker gang understood what the name meant, but they understood the reaction attached to it. The men who stepped from the black SUVs did not move like police officers or security guards. There was no swagger, no visible aggression, just discipline so controlled it felt heavier than violence ever could. One by one, the newcomers spread quietly across the gas station lot with calm, deliberate precision. Their eyes moved constantly. Entrances, exits, distances, reflections in glass. Every motion looked practiced enough to disappear into instinct. Logan Pike straightened fully now, his grin finally fading beneath the growing pressure in the air. "Can I help you guys with something?" he asked loudly, trying to recover control of the moment. None of the men answered him. Not one. Their attention remained locked on Arthur Mercer standing alone beside the fuel pumps beneath the orange desert sky. The first man who had spoken stepped closer slowly. Mid-40s. Broad shoulders. Sun-weathered face. A faint scar crossed one eyebrow. He stopped about 10 feet from Arthur and stared at him in complete disbelief. "Sir." The single word sounded almost fragile coming from someone built like him. Arthur sighed softly through his nose. "Daniel," he said quietly. "You got old." Several of the men near the SUVs exchanged stunned glances immediately. The scarred man let out a breath that almost became a laugh before emotion stopped it halfway. "You remember me." Arthur tilted his head slightly. "You still stand too stiff when you are nervous." A few of the operators behind him actually smiled at that. Small, tired smiles that vanished quickly beneath something heavier. Respect. Logan looked back and forth between them now, irritation mixing dangerously with uncertainty. "Hold on," he snapped. "Who the hell are these guys?" Nobody answered him again. The scarred man finally stepped closer and extended his hand toward Arthur very carefully, like he was approaching something sacred. Arthur accepted the handshake without ceremony. But the second their hands touched, every operator near the SUVs straightened subtly at the same time. Mia saw it through the minimart window and felt chills spread down both arms. Not fear. Reverence. The scarred man swallowed once before speaking again. "Senior Chief Daniel Reeves," he said softly to the others nearby, never taking his eyes off Arthur. "The man standing in front of you carried 5 operators through floodwater after Black Reef. Went down." Silence settled even deeper across the station. One biker lowered his head slightly without realizing it. Another quietly slipped his phone back into his pocket. Logan forced out a laugh that sounded weak now. "What is this supposed to be? Some military reunion?" Daniel Reeves turned toward him slowly for the first time. The temperature in his expression dropped instantly. Not anger. Worse. Controlled disappointment. "You have been disrespecting a retired chief petty officer who disappeared from active records after saving more men than you could count in this parking lot." Logan crossed his arms defensively. "I did not know who he was." Arthur finally spoke before Daniel could answer. "That is because nobody was supposed to." The wind pushed dust across the station again. Arthur looked older suddenly beneath the fading light. tired in ways deeper than age. Daniel glanced toward the worn patch on Arthur's sleeve and shook his head slowly. We searched for you for 12 years. Arthur's pale blue eyes drifted toward the darkening desert highway beyond the station. That was your first mistake. One of the younger operators near the SUVs looked visibly stunned now. Sir, they told us Reaper 6 died offshore. Arthur gave a faint, humorless smile. Almost did. Logan's confidence finally cracked completely. Listen, he said defensively, nobody touched him. Several operators turned toward him at once. Not threatening, not loud, but every biker near him immediately took a small step backward anyway, because suddenly they understood something simple and terrifying. The quiet old disabled veteran they had mocked beside a gas pump was not weak. He was the kind of man dangerous people spoke about softly. The last sunlight of the Arizona evening stretched long across the gas station lot, turning the black SUVs into dark silhouettes against the desert horizon. Nobody moved for several seconds. Even the wind seemed quieter now, carrying only the distant hum of trucks somewhere far down the highway. Logan Pike stood near the fuel pumps with his jaw tight and his confidence bleeding away one realization at a time. Around him, the bikers no longer looked amused. They looked trapped inside a moment they did not understand. Arthur Mercer rested both hands lightly on the black cane and studied the darkening road ahead as if he wished he were somewhere else entirely. Daniel Reeves stood nearby, still staring at the old veteran with the stunned expression of a man seeing a ghost return from the ocean. One of the younger operators finally broke the silence. Sir, he asked carefully, is it true? Arthur did not look at him. Depends what story they told you. The operator swallowed. That black reef was a disaster. A faint tired smile crossed Arthur's face. That part is true. Daniel exhaled slowly and glanced toward the bikers before looking back at Arthur again. They teach parts of it now, he said quietly. Not the real details. Just enough for new teams to understand sacrifice. Arthur's expression hardened slightly at the word. Sacrifice. The desert wind shifted around the gas station, carrying the smell of fuel and hot asphalt through the cooling evening air. Daniel lowered his voice. They never told them your name. Arthur nodded once. Good. Logan finally snapped under the pressure. Okay, enough with the secret agent garbage, he barked loudly. What exactly did this old man even do? Several operators turned toward him slowly. Mia could see the tension in their faces from inside the mini-mart. Not rage. Something colder than that. Daniel stepped forward half a pace. 29 years ago, he said evenly. A recon team was trapped offshore during a storm after a classified extraction failed. The bikers listened now whether they wanted to or not. Communication was collapsing. The bird went down on approach. Most command assumed the team was already dead. Arthur closed his eyes briefly at the memory. Rain. Black water. Rotor blades screaming against the rocks. Daniel continued. Chief Mercer went back into the wreckage 3 separate times after the crash. Logan crossed his arms defensively, but said nothing. The final time, Daniel said softly, the helicopter shifted against the rocks while he was pulling another operator clear. His eyes drifted toward Arthur's prosthetic leg for half a second. Silence settled heavily across the parking lot. One biker slowly removed his sunglasses. Another stared at the ground. 6 men came home alive because he refused to leave them behind. Daniel finished quietly. One of them was me. The words landed harder than shouting ever could have. Logan's face lost color beneath the fading sunlight. He looked toward Arthur again, but now the old veteran seemed completely different somehow. Not weaker, not smaller, just heavier. Like the years around him carried weight ordinary people could feel without understanding why. Arthur finally sighed and looked toward Daniel. You should not have come. Daniel almost laughed at that. Sir, when your patch appeared on my secure phone 20 minutes ago, half the people I contacted thought I was lying. A younger operator near the SUVs shook his head slowly in disbelief. We held memorials for you. Arthur's pale eyes drifted toward the horizon again. That was probably easier for everybody. Mia stepped quietly out of the mini-mart then, unable to stay inside any longer. Arthur noticed her immediately. You made the calls, he said softly. She nodded nervously. I did not know who you were. Arthur gave the faintest smile. That means you are smarter than most people. Logan looked around at his own crew now and realized nobody was standing confidently beside him anymore. The phones were gone. The laughter was gone. Even the desert itself seemed to reject the noise they had brought into the evening, because suddenly everybody there understood the truth. The quiet old man leaning on a black cane beside Pump 4 was not somebody forgotten by history. He was somebody history had tried very hard to bury. Darkness settled slowly across the Arizona desert as the last traces of sunlight disappeared behind the distant mountains. The gas station lights hummed overhead, casting pale yellow reflections across the black SUVs and rows of silent motorcycles. Nobody in the parking lot seemed eager to speak anymore. The bikers who had laughed earlier now stood scattered near the pumps with lowered eyes and uneasy posture, like men suddenly aware they had wandered into something far larger than themselves. Arthur Mercer remained beside his old Ford pickup, one hand resting lightly on the black cane, while desert wind tugged softly at his faded denim jacket. He looked tired now, not weak, just tired in the way mountains look tired after surviving centuries of storms. Daniel Reeves stepped closer again, his expression calmer than before, but still carrying the disbelief of someone facing a living legend he had buried in memory years ago. "Sir," he said quietly, "we can take you wherever you need to go." Arthur gave a small shake of his head. "I was already where I needed to be." Daniel glanced around the parking lot once. "This place." Arthur looked toward the mini-mart windows glowing against the dark highway. Quiet coffee. Empty road. Nobody asking questions. A faint, humorless smile crossed his weathered face. "I almost made it too." Several operators nearby exchanged restrained smiles at that. The tension had eased now, replaced by something heavier and far more uncomfortable for the bikers standing nearby. "Shame." Logan Pike finally stepped forward slowly. Gone was the swagger. Gone was the mocking grin. The desert night had stripped all of it away piece by piece. He cleared his throat awkwardly before speaking. "Look." Arthur turned his eyes toward him calmly. Logan hesitated beneath that steady gaze. "I did not know," he muttered finally. "None of us did." Arthur studied him for a long moment while warm desert wind whispered across the station lot. Then the old veteran nodded once. "That is usually how these things happen." Logan looked confused by the answer. Arthur adjusted his grip on the cane slightly. Men get loud when they think history cannot hear them anymore. Silence followed. Nobody laughed. Nobody moved. Somewhere out on the dark highway, a truck horn echoed faintly through the desert night before fading again into stillness. Mia Brooks stood near the mini-mart entrance watching everything with wide, uncertain eyes. Arthur noticed her and motioned gently toward the coffee station inside. "You still owe me 50 cents change," he said softly. The unexpected comment startled a laugh out of her before she could stop herself. The sound broke some of the pressure hanging over the station. Even Daniel smiled faintly. Mia hurried inside and returned moments later holding 2 quarters in her palm. Arthur accepted them carefully and slipped them into his pocket like they mattered. Maybe they did. "Thank you," Mia said quietly. Arthur tilted his head slightly. "For what?" She looked toward the black SUVs, the operators, the silence surrounding him now. "For serving." Arthur's pale blue eyes drifted toward the dark desert horizon one final time. "Most of the good men did not come home," he said softly. "I just got lucky." Daniel lowered his eyes at that. Every operator near the convoy stood a little straighter without being told. Arthur reached for the driver's side door of his old pickup, but before he opened it, Daniel suddenly came to attention beside him. The movement was sharp and automatic. One by one, the other operators followed. Boots aligned softly against pavement beneath the gas station lights. No commands were spoken. No speeches given, just silence and respect carried on the desert wind. Arthur paused with one hand on the truck door. For the first time all night, emotion flickered visibly across his weathered face. Small, brief, almost painful. Then he returned the salute slowly with 2 fingers near his brow. The bikers stood frozen beside their motorcycles, watching in complete silence as the old veteran climbed into the pickup truck alone. The engine coughed once before settling into a rough, steady idle. Arthur Mercer pulled onto the empty highway beneath the dark Arizona sky while the black SUVs remained motionless behind him. Nobody tried to stop him. Nobody asked where he was going. And long after the old truck disappeared into the desert night, the gas station remained completely silent. Because some men do not need to remind the world who they were. The people they saved remember for them.